what an audition rejection really signifies is not who you are as a musician. It's what your audition preparation process yields.
Welcome to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. And I'd love it if you visited our site at contrabassconversations.com to get all the details about what's going on here. I'd also love it if you reached out and sent me a message. Email me, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. Tell me a little about yourself. Tell me your story. I love hearing people's stories. And another thing I love about hosting this show is the opportunity to be helpful to all of you. I've gone through so many times in my life where I felt stuck, frustrated, hopeless, and I know we all go through this sort of thing. And I love being able to offer constructive solutions to the things that are holding all of us back. And today is the second of 3 episodes featuring people that I've just really connected with their mission and what they're doing, and I found what they're doing so helpful. So last episode, I featured Seth Haynes, who just wrote Break Into the Scene, which hit #1 on Amazon Music Business, and it's filled with really clear advice, which is so nice, about how to actually get work as a musician, how to actually get started. Such a great book. I'm going to be recommending that for years to come, I know. And today, I'm so pumped to bring you this conversation with Rob Knopper. And I've always been fascinated by systems, the systems and the processes that people use to achieve big things in whatever field it happens to be. And that is Rob's mission with his site, Audition Hacker. Now, Rob is a percussionist in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, and he's spent the past few years educating people on how to take auditions. We dig into how Rob keeps practice journals, which is a brilliant system. I wish I'd been doing that my whole life. We talk through his Audition Hacker formula, which is an 8-module course where he teaches his entire step-by-step system. And Rob also offers a mini course called How to Advance in an Orchestra Audition 101. Great title, which you can find at robknopper.com/advance. And links to all of this are in the show notes. I'd also love to give a shout out to our sponsor, D'Addario Strings, and let you know a little bit about their Zyx strings. They come in 2 gauges. They come in a medium and a light tension, and they're being used by artists like Barry Bales, Tim Surratt, Yuri Slavik, Chris Jennings, and many others. And they're great for pizzicato playing. They've got great attack and growl, and they've got great response for arco playing. So they're a good hybrid string. D'Addario strings are made in New York, made in the USA. They're designed, engineered, and crafted at the D'Addario String Factory. And check them out. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, D'Addario. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Rob Knopper. We are on the line with Rob Knopper from the Metropolitan Orchestra and Audition Hacker. And I'm just so thrilled that Rob's up for chatting. Welcome to Contrabass Conversations, Rob.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And you are one of the handful of non-bassists I've talked to. I don't think I've hit 10 yet, but I talked to Blair Tyndall. I talked to another couple people, and I'm so pumped that you want to talk because you're doing things that everybody's curious about with this Audition Hacker and everything. And I'd love to get into that, but maybe let everybody know a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how you got into music.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm honored to be here talking to bassists. I sometimes think that it's kind of weird that the way we grew up and learned our instruments, we kind of kept to ourselves instrument wise. What is the reason that I only should learn about how to make a resume from percussionists, right? That doesn't make sense. What is the reason that I have to learn about strategies to self-record and there are so many things that are instrument non-specific. And so I think it's pretty awesome that we can use this format to bounce ideas off of each other. Anyway, so I grew up in Michigan near Ann Arbor, studied with members of the Detroit Symphony and University of Michigan, started Juilliard, did my undergrad there, studied with members of the New York Phil and the Metropolitan Opera. I did a grad school amount of time after Juilliard and before I got my job at the Met. I was sort of living in my dad's basement for a while, and then I was at New World for a year, and then I got the Met job, and I've been there. I'm starting my 6th season right now. So yeah, it feels kind of, I can't believe it's been so long. It feels like it's just flown by. Yeah, like ever since I started that job, I kind of, it's kind of a weird experience when you spend so much time and energy working on the big project of auditions, of like spending your waking hours emotionally and physically, putting your energy into this massive project. And I think it was like a full decade where I just didn't really think about anything else. I mean, I did, but I would always say, I wonder what photography is like. Nah, I'll do that later. I wonder what writing is like. I'll do that later. So once I got there and I started the job, after I first got tenure, I just worried about that. But then I was like, okay, what else do I do? So like I tried a little of everything. I felt so free because I wasn't obligated to just work on auditions. So I like tried a whole bunch of different things. I tried getting back into video games like I was when I was in middle school. It didn't really stick for some reason. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to do my taxes by myself. And I got this giant book, and then I got like 3 pages in and I gave up. And then like I finally like sort of tried a whole bunch of things until I found that the most interesting things were still the creative pursuits, like writing, photography. I took some music production classes, which taught me how to use, microphones and stuff. I figured out how to make a website, and then I kind of collected all of those little mini skills, I guess you could call them, into making a website where I could talk about what I guess is really most interesting to me, which is audition technique, which is like what I had obsessed over for so long. But now I was able to kind of take it out of my head and put it into an easy to digest format so that somebody who's like me but younger and hasn't figured it out yet could leap over the obstacles that they're facing instead of having to dive headfirst into them and struggle through them.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I mean, you spend, like you said, 10 years of your life doing this, and so many people, they do that, and then if they do land a job, then that's it. All that time, it's like training for the Olympics, and then just it makes total sense when you think about it. Yeah, very cool. So you get all this material together, and was the initial website idea for Audition Hacker, or did you have some other ideas first in terms of websites? How'd that work?
I made a website first because I recorded an album. I recorded an album of 12 snare drum solos, which are like the ultimate snare drum solos that you always have to play for auditions. They were 50 years old. Now they're 52 or whatever. They had never been recorded professionally, but they're like the most commonly played. So like, I guess I'm always looking for like finding the things or making the things that like weren't there for me when I was coming up as a student. So I recorded this album, and I started like in my, pursuit of figuring things out post audition. I was like, well, I'm going to figure out how to market an album. So I got like a bunch of books, and I just started reading during rehearsal. So I decided to make a website and start social media accounts just so that I could market this album, market it. But those are kind of like business terms. But what that really meant was I'm going to go like find out a bunch of nerdy stuff about this album that's never been uncovered. Like I went to meet the composer, who was kind of like this reclusive guy in the south of France who didn't speak any English, who has a very private network, and like there was nothing online about him, even though I estimated that I probably played his music for more hours of my life than anything, like even Beethoven or whatever, just because like his pieces are like the gold standard in percussion. So I like interviewed him. I interviewed a couple other people who are percussionists in France. I wrote just some stuff about how I learned the pieces, how I recorded them, and I put them out as blogs. And so I had this whole like album marketing plan, and then I had to have a website. So yeah, I made the website. Like I think what musicians don't really get sometimes is that it's kind of easy to do something like make a website or write a blog or do these things that seem foreign because they're not in your normal wheelhouse, but like musicians, and correct me if you have another idea about this, but musicians think that the only way to do something well is to spend 15 years in conservatory to do it. And I just reject that premise. It's not as hard to learn how to make a website as it is to learn how to play, some sonata in tune and with nice musicality. It's so much easier, right? And it's kind of fun. Like you can research how to make a website for like 3 days and then just dive in and work on it for 3 days and then you can have one. So yeah.
No, I totally identify with that. I think it's that. I'm trying to remember what the exact phrase is, but we suffer from this massive perfectionism, drive for perfectionism in everything we do. And I think the phrase is like done is better than perfect. And that's like a thing that's really hard for musicians to accept. You said, spending 15 years working on something. I love your writing style, Rob. One thing you'll notice if you subscribe to Rob's newsletter, which you absolutely should. It's full of great info on the site, but there are no capital letters. I think I have not detected any. Have you always written like that? Did your teachers reprimand you back in grade school or?
Well, no, I haven't always written like that. I made the decision with consulting with my good friend who's like a food blogger, and she only writes in lowercase also. And I was like, hey, should I do that? And I kind of was attracted to it because there is such a culture of formality in music, in following the rules in order to get to where you need to go. But then a lot of us don't get to where we need to go and after following all the rules. And I found that after going through all of the education that I went through, which, by and large was awesome and I had great education, but I still felt like there were a lot of things that I had to take in, understand, and reject in order to get where I needed to go. Because for me, the way to play a soft snare drum roll is not like anyone had ever told me. And I had to sort of figure it out by myself. And so I kind of like the idea of presenting a personality or an attitude where I don't mind rejecting the formality and the buttoned up nature of classical music. I don't think that it has to be done that way. I don't think teaching has to be done that way or learning has to be done that way. And I also don't just as a broader point, I don't think it's as fun to listen to classical music when you have to sit down and shut up and not open your crinkly bag of Swedish fish or whatever. I don't know. But and I think just when I started writing like that, I felt like I am rejecting tradition from the moment I'm starting until the moment I'm finishing. And it helped give me permission to write whatever the hell I wanted. As I was writing, I could write about how I don't get anything out of slow practice, right? Which I think is an unusual perspective. And it just doesn't work for me. And I feel like it's a little bit hard for me to put something out online without thinking of it as pure truth. And it's not pure truth that slow practice doesn't work. It's just my truth, right? So I didn't want people to feel like I was speaking for the whole classical music industry, or I'm speaking for every percussionist that this is how everything has to be done. I'm just speaking for me, from my personality, from what went on in my brain, from the, through my education. And I think, I hope the lowercase among, a whole bunch of other methods, people understand that this isn't really supposed to be a traditional education. This is supposed to be a perspective from me. And I'm just a dude. I'm not like a buttoned up, bow-tied guy who looks down at everything. I don't know.
I totally identify it. Yeah. And the lowercase thing, that's just one of many things. It's really, you're right. It's really real. It's kind of, I don't know if vulnerable is the right word, but just very honest. It's very honest writing. And I love how you're telling, in terms of slow practice doesn't work for you. That's one of those things, those holy grails of practicing. And it's just cool to hear that. And another one you emailed out recently is TV practice, which I think is a dirty secret of so many musicians. I love that you emailed that out.
Yeah, like why be embarrassed about watching TV while you play? It works so well for me. Like I'll focus in on what I'm doing, and then I'll zone out, and like my hands will start to adapt to whatever thing I'm trying to get them to get used to, right? And the muscles will start to build, and they'll get more comfortable. And if I'm constantly staring straight at them, trying to focus, it just gets boring, and I don't improve as fast. Like I used to watch TV, like I used to watch baseball games in like the Juilliard practice room, and people would come while I was practicing, and people would come in and be like, dude, you're wasting time. I have to use this room. I'd be like, no, I'm using this room. I'm actually practicing. Like, even though I'm watching TV, you know?
Yeah. Man, that's yeah. Well, I have found that to be an effective technique as well. For me, it was watching The Sopranos endlessly. I would just go through the entire.
Yeah, I used to watch Lost and The Office. Those were great.
Those are nice. Those are a little more upbeat than well, not Lost necessarily, but yeah, The Sopranos was kind of a dark way to practice.
What can you work on bass when you're watching?
Certain technical things, you know, for sure. Bow strokes are a big thing. Probably like the equivalent of sticking techniques or mallet techniques, like different spiccato strokes. I find really helpful, and I've also I talked with several musicians who've done similar things. You know, I'm not going to be like working out my concerto phrasing necessarily in that context, but yeah, I found that helpful too.
Yeah, like articulation stuff.
Yeah, kind of like sharpening the blade, sort of practicing.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Nice.
And so I'd love to hear, you know, I've talked to one of the things I've been doing on the podcast recently is when somebody wins an audition, I set up an interview with them and I say, essentially, how'd you win that audition? But, you know, like, what'd you do 3 months out, 1 month out, 1 week out?
Yeah.
3 days, that kind of thing. And it's interesting to hear what different people say. A lot of people say that they have some sort of aha moment in their audition prep. It's like not making the finals, not advancing. Then all of a sudden it's like something clicks. And then others don't. Others, it's not. Did you have a moment like that?
Well, there was definitely a moment when I felt like my preparation process, like the blueprint, was complete. I feel like for me, I think of audition preparation, it's kind of like a bridge. To get from the beginning to the end, you can't have anything missing. Otherwise, you'll fall in the river, right? So I feel like along the way, there are a whole bunch of different major processes that I have to go through, that I have to check off as being like really effective in terms of auditioning. Without that, I can't do well in an audition, right? My excerpts don't end up sounding good. So I used to be really good at working on the objective details of excerpts and figuring out how to get everything in place. And then I would go to the audition and I would get cut like every single time because a few reasons. One, I wasn't noticing a lot of things in my excerpts that would have been noticed and solved through self-recording. I wasn't bouncing the excerpts off of other people to hear what their reactions were. And so I wasn't really letting the excerpts evolve based on how I think they sound. I was only letting the excerpts improve based on direct practicing in the practice room, looking at my instrument like live, right? And then I also wasn't finding a way to get over nerves. So then I started doing a ton of self-recording where I put these excerpts through this process of observing them by, you record them. And when you listen back, you can observe them in so much finer detail than when you're just practicing live. Because when you're playing and you're listening at the same time, you don't notice a lot of stuff that's going wrong, right? You don't notice that some notes are like just in the wrong place, or like, the intonation is it just doesn't sound quite right going from one note to the next, or, whatever it is. There are a lot of things that become obvious when you listen back to a recording. So I worked really hard to develop kind of a meticulous process to record myself, listen back, create this long list of problems, and then continue this repetitive process of recording, listening back, thinking of ways to solve the problem, recording, listen, like just this circle. And then the list of problems would get longer and longer, but then I would find solutions for each one, and then it would start getting shorter. And then sometimes it would get longer again, because as you record yourself, you always keep uncovering problems. And finally, when it got to 0, then that was the point where I really felt like I had created an excerpt that had an interpretation that I was so happy with, that I couldn't find anything wrong with, that I could like put it on a recording and play it for like Leonard Bernstein, or like something like that. But after that, after I figured out how to do that, I was still getting cut, because I still hadn't worked out what other people thought of my excerpts. I had only made them sound good for me, but I didn't figure out, how they affected other people as they were listening. And I hadn't gotten over nerves yet. So then I worked really hard on figuring out how to do mock auditions in like the most epic possible, thorough way that I could. And it's kind of like that in terms of like finding a way to research excerpts that's like fully replicable. You can apply it to any excerpt, and you can trust that the steps you've created, you can just put any excerpt through and it'll come out the other side ready to go. And it was just a matter of working all of those processes up and building that bridge so that all the stones were in place. And finally, when I got to the point where everything was in place, then it was like nothing could stop me. It was like I got into Tanglewood for the first time after like 6 or 7 years of trying, and I had to say no because I went to NRO instead. And then the next year I got into Tanglewood again, but then I was in the Met. So like, what can you do? So yeah, I didn't go again. But like, I just started. It became the point where it was like I couldn't get anywhere, and then all of a sudden I was just like unstoppable, and then I stopped auditioning forever.
Sure. Well, so that's awesome. So I love that. So you've got this recording and reflection and finding problems process, and then you've got this phase of playing for other people and getting their reactions. I was interviewing Robin Kesselman, who's the new principal bass of Houston. He's been there a few years now, and he talks about, he had described it similarly. He called it his hibernation process, and then taking the show on the road. And we were talking about like how he tried to organize that leading up to the audition. Did you kind of constantly like go between the recording and playing for people, or did you have like a period of weeks where you would just record and then take it on the road, or how did that work for you?
Yeah. Well, so I kind of look at it as, first of all, in terms of how long you should be preparing for this audition, I think of it as there's one day where you get the list, and then there's another day where you find out your audition date. And the question isn't how long should I prepare, it's how long after I get the list should I wait. And I always think as long as you have problem-solving processes that you're going through, where you're using like the scientific method or whatever, observing problems, coming up with possible solutions, experimenting with those solutions, picking one that works best, observing more problems, as long as you're going through a process where you're solving more problems, the longer you do that, the more problems will be solved, right? So I always maximize my amount of time. So I started working on my Met audition like as soon as I got the list. I might have like spent a week deciding to take the audition, but it was like 4.5 months that I practiced for it, right? So I go through phases, and I organize those phases out in advance. I say, I want to start mock auditioning 6 weeks before. And like, I'm literally going to do one mock audition every day for 6 weeks. And like the amount of progress you can make and the amount you can learn about your excerpts in 6 weeks of daily mocks is like pretty incredible. And the amount of nerves that you can blow past and not have to deal with at the audition is pretty cool. So I say, I want to start mock auditioning 6 weeks before. At the beginning, I have to spend about a week researching my excerpts, like listening to all the recordings, taking notes, finding tempos, finding phrasing, imagining character. So that's a week. And so I think of excerpt research as phase 0. Mock auditions is phase 3. Then phase 1 and 2 are in the middle. And they usually, depends on how much music you have to do, because those can be calculated. How long it takes you to learn music, to learn the notes, depends on how many measures you have, right? So like each measure takes a certain amount of time, and therefore each excerpt is going to take a certain amount of time. So the Met list was really, really long. So it took me 2 months or so to really learn the notes. And all I was doing during that time was learning notes. It would take me like 3.5 hours to learn the notes for each excerpt. But then that was like all I did in one day, or I would do that in another excerpt, and that was all I did in one day or whatever. But after I went through this process, which was so thorough and muscle memorizing and ingraining, then I would know the excerpts cold, right? They wouldn't be polished. I wouldn't know what they sound like to other people. I just knew that I could run them. That's phase one, learning the notes. So that took 2 months or something like that. Then I had another 6 weeks of self-recording still not mock auditioning, but that taking the excerpts that I knew I could run, that were solid but not polished, and then putting them through my self-recording process for 6 weeks. Still the same way, one each day or 2 each day maybe, but just putting them through a process that I knew would solve so many problems about them. And of course, this seems very regimented. There are exceptions, there are excerpts that don't fall cleanly into this that I work on in learning the notes phase, and then I have to redo it the next day because something went wrong. Anyway, yeah, I'm still I basically set up this plan, and then every day I evaluate if the plan still holds or if I have to adjust. But it's cool to have this full plan because you're not just choosing what you're doing today or tomorrow. You know that if you make an adjustment to your schedule tomorrow, that affects the next day, which affects the next day, which affects the next week. And if that's a viable decision, I should skip that excerpt today and go to the bar because I have that extra time, next week on Tuesday in the morning that I could put it in, and I know that I'm still going to get everything else done for the rest of this time that I know I need to do. And so it does adjust over the period.
That's cool. I love that plan. That's great. That's and it's, talking to other people that have landed big jobs, like the Met, it seems like rarely do I talk to someone, they're like, oh, I just kind of banged away at the music and hey, here I am, in a major orchestra. And something that's on your site, and I'll make sure to link to it, is how you approach practice journals or just kind of organizing excerpts in general. And I totally identify with this because I kind of came to a similar system myself, but you've got these plastic, the sheet protectors and all that. Can you maybe just talk through how you approach the I don't know what you want to call it, just the audition binder system, or how you deal with the paper behind the audition?
Yeah. So you always hear you're supposed to take practice notes, right? And the classic way to think about it is you have one of those exam books for school, and okay, today's day one. It's September 30th, 2016, 8 a.m. I practiced 14 scale exercises. Check. 10 a.m. I practiced my, Mozart 39, but I tried that and it didn't really do, if I would go into a room one day, it didn't allow me to have all the information I needed at the time I needed it. It was irrelevant. I could flip through a bunch of days and learn nothing. So what I really wanted was I wanted to be organized by piece, right? And it doesn't matter the things I did yesterday, the things I did the day before. What I really want is when I take out a piece and I'm working on a specific measure, I have all of the notes that I've made on that piece in terms of notes I've made when working on it, exercises that I've written out for it, lesson notes from my teachers, and notes from maybe if it's an excerpt listening to recordings and tempos or which recording is best. I want to have the relevant information from my past so that I can, if I'm having a problem, look back and see, how did I fix that last time? Or maybe I didn't, maybe I've never had to deal with that. So the way that actually looks is you go to a lesson, you record it, always record it. It's precious information. You go home, you transcribe the recording, or at least write down the important bullet points, and then you organize it by piece, right? Each piece has general comments and measure-specific comments. And then you date that and you save it into its own file, and this is, I'm sure that there are technological ways that this, can be improved upon at this point. And what I would do is I would print out the October 13th lesson with my, college teacher from sophomore year on Delacluze 1. And that would be like my notes from that lesson. And when I go into the practice room for the rest of that week, I would take that lesson, the notes from that lesson, and put it on my stand on one side, and the music is on the other side. So as I'm practicing, I'm revisiting every single topic or, concept or bullet point that my teacher was talking about so that I can ingrain it and have a better chance. At the very least, it's like, self-preservation. You want to go into your lessons without your teacher yelling at you for forgetting what they said. But then fast forward to 2 years later, you've now played that piece for that teacher twice. You played it for a visiting teacher once, and you have notes that you took on your own that are also dated. And you have this chronological packet of notes that you've taken on that piece that you can apply to your work now, right? You may not be looking at that stuff constantly, but it's all right there exactly in the place you need it. And sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from working on a measure, not knowing how to fix it, and just being like, God, I wonder how I figured that out last time. Flipping through and being like, oh, my teacher said something then that didn't really make sense to me, but I get it now. And I'm going to try it. And maybe something else I've learned along the way helps me synthesize that concept and apply it to that new thing. So what that ends up looking like in terms of a practice journal is every piece has the music. It's paired with all these old notes and, lesson notes and my notes and exercises and research. And it's alphabetical. They're going to come back again. So you have this sort of like storage of all of these pieces you might play one day and you've played in the past. And then you have like the current pieces you're working on, where you just take out each of these plastic protectors that are getting thick by this point with notes, and you put it so you have like your 4 or 5 like pieces you're working on right now, or maybe like 30 if you're working on an audition or whatever. And you have everything that you've ever done on those pieces. And it's awesome because I have this going all the way back to high school. Like somehow I just decided I'm like a pack rat for information. I'm like what do you call it? Like when you can't throw anything away.
Oh, a hoarder. You're a hoarder.
Yeah. And this is like the way that hoarding information works. I don't hoard other stuff, but information is precious. I'll never throw it away. I hoard emails. I hoard like documents on my computer. I hoard like old contracts or whatever, because when at that desperate moment, when you're trying to work through something that sucks, you might just need to search for like how to fix it in your old, the collection of information that you've learned in your life that you may not remember.
Man, such a useful way to organize things. It's so cool that you stumbled upon that so early, because I go back to my mom's house and it's filled with my old practice journals from high school and college, and they're fun to look through, but they're essentially useless in that I can't suss out the details without taking 3 weeks and trying to reconstruct. But I mean, I love that tied to the piece. That's just so beautiful. That's fantastic. I'd love to hear a little bit, maybe let people know about you've got the Audition Hacker Academy, right? That's up on the site. Can you let people know what that is?
Yes. So when I started at the Met, I knew that I had this audition preparation process that was unique, at least, and it worked for me. And it was something that I felt like I wanted to teach other people about. I would package it into these 60 or 90-minute clinics. And I would go to BUTI or NRO or Aspen or whatever, Juilliard, and teach these 90-minute versions of basically what I was explaining before. And it was awesome. And then people would come up to me and be like, okay, I get kind of what you're doing. Now, how do I learn it? Like, how do I learn it for real? And I was like, well, maybe you could come and study with me for like 3 full days, or you could like take weekly classes with me, weekly lessons, but like, no, like, why would they do that? Like, come to New York and do that with me? You know, it was hard for me to see how I would actually teach that. And it's the kind of thing where if I teach it to one person, it's going to be pretty much the same as if I teach it to another person. So it didn't make sense for me to do it live. It doesn't make sense for them to spend as much money as it would cost to actually like pay for 10 full lessons from me just to have me explain something. So I kind of packaged it into this online course, which is like my entire audition preparation process, step by step, every single thing, every single major system broken down into the individual details of like, first, start, this is like your guiding principle, then you start working on the excerpt this way, and this is how you break it down, all the way up to like self-recording, to mock auditions. I have like a mock audition walkthrough and a spreadsheet and how to track progress, to audition day. It's like everything beginning to end, and it's all like in this like linear video course. It's like taking a college class, but you can do it from your home or, your practice room as you're working on it. So I have that class, and there's like 140, 150 people enrolled in that. It's pretty crazy to track people's progress. People come to me when they really, I think, are kind of at their lowest point, which I remember being at my lowest point a lot of times. Like, you always feel like you're at your lowest point when you're doing, like when you get your rejection and you're like, damn it, I don't know what to do next. I thought I did everything. And I'm like, okay, whoa, take a step back. Like, there have to be holes if you're not advancing, right? So I track, these people's progress, and like people say, come to me and say like, okay, I went through this. I took an audition. I didn't advance, but I felt like I had no nerves for the first time ever. Or then they come to me and they say, I had no idea what to expect because I had prepared in a totally new way and it was a risk, but I advanced for the first time in my life. And then, so I've had people now, at this point, it's been out for like almost a year. I've had people win jobs. I've had people make finals for the first time. People who had never advanced have advanced. But like, what I really love most about it is that no matter what kind of success you find with it, and it's not like I'm going to, enroll somebody in a course and be like, I promise you're going to be in the San Francisco Symphony. Like, that's not realistic. That's not like at all what I'm saying. What I'm happiest with most, no matter where people get to, is that they feel empowered, that they know exactly what to do, exactly the order of steps that is effective, and they can see the holes, right? They understand what they haven't done. And I think that, to me, that would have been like the most awesome thing for me to have as a person coming up auditioning. I do have, so that one is one that is like a actual class. It costs money, but I do have one that I made that's free. It was like sort of the one I made first when I was like working through my concepts, and it's shorter. It's like a more succinct version, and it's one that it's like a 3-part video series, right? And I go through, like, the first thing I tackle is like why the concept of it's impossible to win an orchestra audition. I just like totally disagree with that. I think that there are a lot of reasons why it's a viable career path. It's a career path that I planned on having, and it's a career path that I followed. And I know that not everybody can have like success with it, but for those people who really, really, really want it, there is a path to success there. And I also talk about the general outline of like what I said, my audition preparation, the 3 phases. And I also have this one video where I talk about how the committee is really listening to you and what kind of musically, what kind of things you should be focusing on. I have the recording of my winning audition that I like had a recorder out for. I have those in the video, and I use those to explain through concepts so you can like really hear what it sounds like when somebody like plays an audition that ends up having a success. So I have that over at robknopper.com/advance. robknopper.com/advance. Yeah. So that one is like just one that is, maybe it's free. So it's like not a big barrier to like entry or whatever. So that might be a good place to start. The practice journal blog is up there on the blog at my website. There's a bunch of other random stuff. I just like keep putting out things that I feel like are important concepts to talk about.
It's great. No, I love that. I'll make sure I link up to all of that. And, folks listening, even if you're not actively taking auditions, and I know a lot of you are, go to Rob's site and get on his email list because he's a great writer. It's really interesting stuff. I mean, I subscribe to a lot of email lists, and Rob's emails are one that I click on right away and read and save. And yeah, I appreciate you taking the time talking to me. This is super cool. And this is like something that people keep, it's an obviously finding employment in the music industry is a major area of concern and interest. And I just love what you're presenting. And I love the way you're doing it. It makes so much sense. Like you were saying, not everybody can come and take 10 lessons with you to go through this. And especially if you'd be doing the same thing or similar thing to all of them, an online course is perfect for that. So I hope folks check that out as well. Is there anything else you want to get out on the podcast?
No, I mean, I don't think so. The only thing that I would say is like, I think it's kind of intimidating for people to think of how their audition process could end up looking like that. Or, it seems like such a gigantic, far away idea to be able to like do well at an audition. And I think the point that I like really want to hammer home and for people is when you take an audition and you don't do well, or you, in your own opinion, whatever, that you get rejected or you feel like something went wrong, a normal reaction, I think, and I had this and I still have this, is that's a measurement of me as a musician. I, as a person, did badly at this audition, and therefore I am a bad musician, right? I am a musician who doesn't have what it takes or whatever, When I work my hardest and when judged by people who know what they're talking about, I can't cut it. And I think it's so hard. It was always so hard for me to remember. And it still is actually, like when I still feel like I have moments of rejection or like moments of failure it's hard to remember that what an audition rejection really signifies is not who you are as a musician. It's what your audition preparation process yields. It's what the product is after you go through a set of steps where at the end you test your process and see how it worked. And what you bring, when you take an audition with a rejection or with a successful outcome, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you take the preparation process with you to the next audition and you make small improvements to it. You make little tweaks. You do one thing differently or two or three things differently, and you improve the actual process that you go through from the day you get your list to the day of the audition. And that is the thing that you're working on. You're always working on that. You're not working on the day of. You're not working on the results. You're working on the process. And that's your asset. That's the thing that you have that you can continue pouring your energy into, improving it and improving it. And that's the thing that in 10 years will end up yielding the right result eventually. But until then, don't worry about the rejections. Just worry about the process. It's so hard for me to remember that when I get a rejection. It's like, it's the most terrible feeling. And like, I always want to hammer it home because it's something maybe it's just something I need to keep telling myself, but it's something that I believe that it's just hard to remember in like the emotional moments after an audition when you're trying to like deal with that. You know what I mean?
Oh, I totally know what you mean. No, it's great. You're like an audition scientist, Rob. It's fantastic.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Rob, so great to have you on the podcast. Folks, you have to check out his website if you haven't, robknopper.com. Get on his email list. You won't be disappointed. It's great content, always entertaining, just such a useful resource. I love what he's doing. Check him out. And if you're new to the podcast, after the interview, this is kind of where I go off script and just share feedback and news and things that are coming up. So if you make it this far into the podcast, I kind of consider you the super fans. You've made it to the end. So congratulations. You're in the inner circle. And I always love when people reach out and they say, hey, I heard that you talked about this, or that's really exciting. And it's this stuff at the end of the podcast. And I know that you have achieved super Contrabass Conversations fan status if you've made it this far. And I actually have a few things coming up. And I think I'm going to just do a little experiment and announce them first at the end of the podcast and see who responds. I like to give out some bonuses to the super fans, and I'm going to have some more tangible bonuses to give out coming up here soon. So that should be exciting. So a little bit of news here. And, the way I record these episodes is I batch record them. Otherwise, I would completely lose my mind doing these. So I take a couple days and I just edit the interviews, put them together, record my yik yak at the beginning and the end like I'm doing now, and then publish them. So I get listener feedback and news and stuff sort of piles up. So I'm always kind of like playing catch up with that sort of thing. But I have a few bits of news. First of all, I put out a post. I'll put this in the show notes. 10 preparation strategies I've learned from Audition Winners. And this is published on auditioncafe.org. And it's a pretty popular site. Got a whole bunch of views, about 2,000 views of that article. And it's basically just a bunch of quotes from the Winning the Audition series. And I'm super pumped. In maybe the next 3 to 4 weeks, I'm going to have the book version of Winning the Audition out, which has elements of the podcast series that I did that is really a new piece of content. Maybe only 30% of it is repurposed from that podcast series. Ira Gold is writing a foreword to the book, and so I'm excited to have that. More news to come. If you'd like a preview copy, I could use some help with some final editing. And so here's one thing, if you've made it this far, if you are interested, shoot me an email or Facebook message or Twitter, whatever, and let me know you're interested, and I'll send you a copy happily. I'd love to get your feedback and some final edits before I put that out there. That's the first of many projects I have coming up the next 6-8 months, but hopefully that'll be done in a month. Putting the podcast series together, like the Win the Audition, that's pretty quick, actually. Well, I mean, it's complex. It's quite complex, but it moves relatively quickly. But man, writing the books, that's what takes a long time. I remember that from my Road Warrior Without an Expense Account book back in 2008, and same thing with this book. So some listener feedback, and I love hearing from folks. Please write in and say hi. Let me know some ideas for the show, upcoming events, that sort of thing. Feedback at contrabassconversations.com, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. It'll all get to me. David Parat writes in. And if I mispronounce your name, you can write in and let me know. Or if you do write in, you can give me a little pronunciation lesson. So David, I hope that's right. But David recommended Bill Merchant as a guest. He was listening to Trevor Davis, which was the previous podcast, or 2 podcasts ago, rather, and thought that Bill would be a great guest. And I agree, and reached out to Bill. And I'm talking to Bill in 2 days. So that's exciting. And thank you, David. We have Manoa Bell wrote in. She's a bass student of Sam Suggs and has been listening to the podcast for the last 6 months religiously, she says. So thank you. That's awesome. And she says, I want to thank you for this amazing project, as it has connected me to this inspiring group of musicians and inspired me to keep playing the bass, as I am sure it has many other kids my age. Your interviews are always insightful, ask the questions that really matter, past the wall of technique and simple questions of career, but instead to the heart of the artist and the constant search for our voice as musicians through the beautiful strings of our instrument. Wow. That's great. We should put that on a plaque and hang that on a wall somewhere. That is just such a beautiful sentiment. And if you haven't figured it out, even though the show is called Contrabass Conversations, and I'm talking generally with bassists, although not always, as you can see from the last couple episodes, I'm more interested in talking about deeper topics than string choices and rosin and standing or sitting and that sort of thing. So thank you for that. And that's something that I'm constantly working on. It's funny, doing a podcast is kind of like it reminds me a lot of conducting in a way, in that you're practicing in public. The only way you can get better at doing this is to do it and put it out there and get feedback and get better and that sort of thing. And it's similar to practicing as a musician, but I do think it's different, because when I'm practicing my bass, I'm in my private room, my private time, me, the bass, the music, and this is just sort of a different thing. It's a very public activity, but it's just like practicing anything. The more you do it, the better you get. Valentina Betancourt wrote in and said, "Hello, Master Heath," which is very flattering. You don't. I'm a fan of your page. I think you're doing an amazing job, especially for us, the young double bassists in third world countries who love to hear the experiences and advice of other masters from around the world. Thank you so much. She's from Venezuela. How cool is that? Those messages, I love hearing messages like that. And it's just so cool to me to think about Valentina in Venezuela, thousands of miles away, listening to these. And I really do. I know I've said this on the podcast before, but I do forget that these get out there like that, because it really is like me talking with somebody on Skype or in person, preferably if I can, and then just doing a bunch of tech stuff on the computer in my apartment in San Francisco. And I sort of forget that they get out there like that. And even though I look at the numbers and I know that they're downloaded thousands of times, it still is, it's hard to actually realize that. And so messages like that are so cool to me. And so thank you for that, Valentina. Christopher Zurab, and I hope that's right, Christopher, wrote in and said, "I've listened to Contrabass Conversations for a long time. The first thing I saw was Miloslav Gajdoš playing and singing on a video, and the podcast has been very inspirational. Got lots of helpful tips from all these great bassists." And yeah, that video, that's funny. I forgot that I ever did that video. I've got this great Miloslav Gajdoš video at Greg Sarche, one of the lyric opera bassists in Chicago, in his apartment, or not his apartment, his house. Miloslav was singing and playing, and I just had my cheesy little Canon camera out and was filming it. And that, like many of these videos I put out in the mid 2000s, has like 30,000 views or something ridiculous like that. All right. I think that's it for listener feedback. I have a lot more listener feedback, but I'll kind of parcel this out over the next few episodes. And again, I'm honored by every message I get. I love hearing from people. I love hearing suggestions, interview ideas, whatever. Reach out and let me know. It's helpful. It inspires me to keep working on this. And I'm having a blast doing this podcast. I hope you're enjoying following along. I think the podcast is getting better as I do it more. And certainly, if I think about, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the relaunch. That was in November. So here we are in October. So in a couple of weeks, it'll be the 1 year anniversary. In that year, about over 100 episodes. So that's a pretty substantial bit of content, but also more important than the number, which is, I don't really care that much about the number. I feel like the quality has been getting better, and it's not that I've had quality guests since day one, but I think just I've been focusing on this so much more that I've been getting a better idea of how to be a good host, how to find guests that are a good fit, how to pull out interesting content. Hopefully that's coming through. And so I'm having a blast doing this. Thank you again to Dario for sponsoring the podcast. The sponsorship is so helpful in keeping this going. And more news to come on that front coming up here in the next few episodes. But we'll call it a day with that. Thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you following along. Thank you, super fans, for making it to the end right here. And we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.